My name is June Halbrook. I'm 68 years old, retired nurse, widow, and mother of one. Most days I make tea at 5:30, feed the birds, and tend to the patch of tulips my son planted for me when he was 12. He said they looked like lanterns, tiny ones, that lit up the yard. Last Thursday morning, I was in my kitchen arranging a vase of lilies, his favorite. The radio played softly in the background. It was the kind of day that pretends to be ordinary until it isn't. My phone rang. I wiped my hands, reached for the receiver, and answered like I always do, with softness. Hello? A pause. Then Kara's voice, sharp, cold, controlled. June, I just wanted to let you know. Blaine passed away yesterday evening. I stopped breathing. Just like that. My hand clenched around the kitchen towel. The room didn't spin. It just dulled. Like someone had drawn a curtain between me and the world. He's gone, I whispered. Another pause. Then came the second blow. We already buried him. This morning. Small ceremony. Close friends only. I blinked at the phone. My brain tried to make sense of the words, tried to stitch them together in a way that made sense, but they just sat there, raw and unfinished. What time? I asked. Not out of curiosity, out of need. Kara cleared her throat. It doesn't matter now, he's long gone. That was the phrase. He's long gone. Not he passed. Not, I'm sorry, June. Not you can still come by the house if you want to sit with his things. Just, he's long gone. I stood in silence after she hung up. The lilies slipped from my hand and scattered on the floor. There was no cry, no scream, only the quiet gasp of a mother trying to fit the size of her grief into a body too old to carry it all at once. I made it to the chair in the corner, the one with the worn cushion he used to sit in when he visited. Except he hadn't visited in years. Because every time I called, Kara said he was tired. Every holiday, she said they were traveling. Every birthday, there was an excuse. Some were polite, some were clipped, some were almost convincing. And I didn't want to be a burden. So I believed her. 7 days passed. 7 days where I didn't know where my son's body lay. No grave, no marker, no closure. I didn't speak to anyone. I watered his tulips. I dusted the empty guest room. I checked my voicemail over and over, hoping maybe she'd left one. Anything. Then, on the 8th morning, the phone rang again. It was her, but the voice was different. Not cold, not rehearsed. Panicked. "What are you doing to my life, June?" she snapped. "What the hell are you doing?" I didn't say a word. I sat back in the chair. The lilies were still on the floor, dry now. In front of me, on the table, lay an envelope. It had my name on it, in my son's handwriting. Blaine's. I ran my fingers over the ink, and I thought to myself, you buried my son without me. You kept him from me in life. But now he's coming back. A week after she buried my son without telling me, she called again. This time, it wasn't cold. It was chaos. The phone rang just as I was sitting down at the kitchen table. Same chair, same vase of lilies, though now they'd withered. Same photo of Blaine tucked in the corner of the frame, where his 10-year-old grin still looked like summer. But this time, there was something else on the table. A manila envelope, unsealed. Its contents, a certified copy of Blaine's will, signed 3 months before he died, witnessed, notarized, official, and inside my name. Not hers, just mine. The phone rang a second time. I picked it up, slow and steady. "June?" Her voice cracked. "What? What are you doing?" Silence. She didn't deserve answers. I got a call from the lawyer, she said quickly. Ezra Raines? He said Blaine left everything to you. That doesn't make sense? He wouldn't do that. Not without telling me. Not unless. I let her spiral. I watched her words stumble over themselves through the receiver. I mean, I've been his wife for 10 years. We were happy, mostly. And sure, he got distant lately, but that's just, people drift sometimes, right? That's not enough to cut me out completely. You must have done something. I let the silence grow. 1 second, 2, 3. Then I said, I didn't do anything, Kara. That's the problem. There's a kind of power in saying less. When someone expects you to shout and you don't, it unsettles them. When someone expects you to beg and you don't, it shakes their grip on the story. Kara went quiet on the other end. Then I heard her breathing pick up, fast and ragged, like she was pacing. I didn't mean to leave you out of the funeral, okay? I just thought it would be too hard on you. I didn't want to add more pain. And it was all so fast. The hospital, they barely gave me time to think. I closed my eyes. He didn't die in the hospital she said he did. I called. They'd never heard of him. I thought you didn't want to be involved, she said. Lower now, more measured. You never called. You stopped showing up. I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out a stack of unsent birthday cards. One for each of the last 5 years, each addressed to Blaine. All returned. Not at this address. Not accepted. Marked in red. He thought you didn't care anymore, June. That's what I told him, Kara whispered. I told him you were moving on, living your own life. I reached for the envelope again. Inside was something else. A letter, short, handwritten, folded in half. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say what I needed to. But I know now. I know you didn't stop loving me. You were just pushed out. Quietly. Carefully. I'm sorry I believed it for as long as I did. I'm leaving everything to you. Not out of anger, but because I trust you'll know what to do with it. Whether that means forgiving her or not. That's your choice. I love you. Blaine Kara's voice came back, loud now, desperate. Tell me you're not going to ruin me, June. Please. This house is all I have left. I didn't think I didn't know. I pressed my fingers against the folded letter, steadying myself. You buried him, I said, and didn't even call. She stuttered. I panicked. I thought you'd make it about you. No, I replied. I would have made it about him. Then I ended the call. No yelling, no threats. Just the sound of me setting the phone back in its cradle. The room was quiet again, except for the wind tapping the window. I turned back to the letter, reread the last line. That's your choice. And for the first time in 7 days, I realized. I still had one. I didn't stop being his mother. I just stopped being invited. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part people don't understand. It's not like one day the door slams in your face. It closes slowly, softly. Sometimes it even smiles while it locks you out. The first time I noticed it was Blaine's 32nd birthday. I'd baked him that chocolate cake he loved. 3 layers, with the peanut butter frosting I always made when he was little. I even wrapped it up in that old silver cake dome he gave me for Mother's Day back in 2001. Said it made me look official. I called Kara that morning to let her know I was coming by. Her voice was cheerful, but clipped. Oh. June. That's sweet, but actually, we're heading out for dinner with his co-workers tonight. Big team celebration. Maybe next weekend? I offered to drop it off. Just 10 minutes. No need to come inside. Just a hug. A smile. A candle, maybe. She paused, then said, "He's already left for work. He won't be home until late." I drove over anyway. And when I got there, his car was in the driveway. That was the first time. The second time was Thanksgiving. I'd set the table for 3, bought extra cranberries, even printed out a recipe for her gluten-free stuffing. 2 days before, Kara called. "I think we're going to do something quiet this year. Just the 2 of us. Blaine's been under so much pressure at work." I remember I said, "He always loved carving the turkey." She laughed. "He still does." Then hung up. I ate alone that year, on the good china, because somehow I needed something to feel worth it. And then Christmas. I mailed a box with wrapped gifts, hand-knitted scarves, and a note. "Blaine, you always loved green, and Kara's scarf is plum. I remember her saying once that she liked dark colors. Hope you're both staying warm. Love, Mom." 2 weeks later, the box came back. Return to sender. Wrong address. But it wasn't the wrong address. It was their house. I wrote the zip code myself. I knew it like I knew my own name. People think mothers lose their sons to distance. But distance isn't always miles. Sometimes it's a missing chair at the table, a call that never comes, a gift returned unopened. Sometimes it's the moment you hear your child speak to you like a stranger. A few years ago, I ran into Blaine's college roommate, Jeremy, at the pharmacy. He lit up when he saw me. "Mrs. Halbrook, how's Blaine? Still playing guitar?" I smiled, said, "I think so." But the truth was, I hadn't heard him play in years. Not since Kara said the sound gave her migraines. She never liked noise. Not from guitars. Not from mothers. Looking back now, I realize it was never about one big fight. There were no slammed doors. No shouted accusations. Just a series of quiet edits. A call redirected. A visit delayed. A question answered by someone else. I didn't even notice the erasure at first. That's how subtle it was. Like fog. It doesn't fall all at once. It creeps. And when it's fully settled, you can't remember what the view used to look like. I kept every birthday card he sent me. At least until they stopped coming. The last one was 5 years ago. A simple card with a sketch of tulips on the front. Inside, "To the one who always sees the light in people. Love, Blaine." I read it again last night, and I wondered, when did he stop seeing mine? They didn't take him from me violently. They just moved him, inch by inch, until one day I turned around and he was on the other side of a wall I didn't know they were building. And I wasn't allowed in. After the phone call, I sat still for a day, maybe 2. Time gets slippery when you're grieving someone you didn't get to say goodbye to. But on the 3rd morning, something in me moved. It wasn't rage. It wasn't hope either. It was something quieter, heavier, like duty. If Kara wouldn't tell me where my son was buried, then I'd find out myself. I started with the hospital. I remembered she said, Blaine died from complications after a procedure. That's what she told me. Something vague. Infection. Recovery. Too fast to process, she said. I knew Blaine was supposed to be at St. Augustine General. At least, that's where Kara said he was being treated last month when I called to check on him. So I called them. St. Augustine General, how may I help you? Yes. I'm looking for information about my son. He passed recently. Blaine Halbrook, I spelled it. Twice. The woman on the other end typed for a moment. then said gently, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. We don't have a patient by that name." I felt my breath catch. "He had surgery," I insisted. "He was in for an infection. His wife said he died there." More typing. "We haven't had a patient named Blaine Hallbrook in the last 6 months." I thanked her, slowly, hung up, then just sat there, staring at the phone. Maybe it was the wrong hospital. So I tried another, and another, and another. 7 calls in all said the same thing. No record, no patient, no surgery, no Blaine. At one point, a young man, probably an intern, asked if I might have the dates wrong. I said, "No. My son died a week ago. His wife told me." Silence. Then he said, "I'm sorry for your loss," and ended the call like he was excusing himself from a conversation that didn't make sense. I moved on to funeral homes. I Googled everyone within 30 miles of their house. Peterson and Sons, Willow Grove, Sunrise Memorial. I called them all. "Do you have record of a Blaine Hallbrook? Any services in the past 2 weeks?" Each answer came back the same. No listing, no booking, no obituary. I even asked if any private ceremonies had been held without public notice. A few said they'd check. One woman offered her condolences. Another apologized for not being able to help. But none of them said yes. By the end of the afternoon, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the receiver. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was unraveling. I made tea, but didn't drink it. I stood by the sink, watching the tulips through the window, and wondered, how do you mourn someone when no one will confirm they're gone? How do you let go of a son when the world acts like he never arrived? Later that night, I sat with the shoebox in the closet, the one with his baby photos, the lock of hair from his first haircut, the paper plate with his painted handprint in blue acrylic. His handwriting was still so familiar to me. I could trace it in my sleep. That's what made it worse, because every phone call I'd made that day had told me the same thing, that he was nowhere. Nowhere official, nowhere recorded, nowhere traceable. I wasn't just a grieving mother anymore. I was a ghost. In the story of my son's life and death, I wasn't a character. I was a footnote, an inconvenient name. Someone Kara had managed to erase, not with violence, but with silence. And silence, I was learning, could be far crueler. I went to bed with my clothes still on. I didn't cry. Not that night. Instead, I folded the blanket over my knees, stared at the ceiling fan, and whispered the question that had begun to hollow me out. "Where are you, Blaine?" There's a difference between mourning and investigating. I only realized that when I found myself staring not at photos or memories or the bottom of a tea mug, but at an old business card tucked inside my recipe book. Richard T. Madsen, Estate and Family Law, my late husband's lawyer. He was sharp as a tack, even in his 70s, wore suspenders, still wrote letters by hand, and once told me, "June, when people lie, their documents don't."
That seemed to bounce off every rock face and tree trunk in the canyon. I was lost, completely, utterly lost on a trail I'd hiked dozens of times. That's when I saw the light. Not electric light, firelight. Flickering orange light coming from somewhere ahead and to my left, off the main trail. Against every horror movie instinct I'd ever developed, I pushed through the underbrush toward it. Whatever was back there in the darkness felt more threatening than whatever might be waiting by that fire. What I found was a campsite, but not a normal campsite. It was tucked into a small clearing, hidden from any official trail. There was a fire ring made of stones, but the fire had burned down to just glowing embers. Around the clearing, scattered like some kind of bizarre museum exhibit, were personal belongings from different decades. A leather hiking boot from the 1980s, judging by the style. A modern smartphone in a cracked waterproof case. A film camera that looked like it was from the 1970s. Backpacks in various states of decay. Camping gear ranging from vintage to brand new. And in the center of it all, wrapped in a plastic bag and wedged between two rocks, was a journal. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The entries were from different people, written in different handwriting, spanning what looked like several years. But they all told variations of the same story. Day 1, got turned around on Eagle Creek Trail. Something's been following me since sunset. Keeps making sounds like me. Day 3, found this camp. Other people have been here. Thing won't let me leave. Keeps whistling. Food running low. Day 7, it's learning. Yesterday it said my name. Today, it said my daughter's name. How does it know my daughter's name? The entries got progressively more desperate, more illegible. People had been trapped here for days, sometimes weeks. And the most recent entry, written in shaky block letters, was dated just 2 weeks ago. My name is Marcus Williams. If someone finds this, tell my wife I tried to come home. It's been 12 days now. The thing doesn't just mimic anymore. It talks. It knows things about my life it shouldn't know. Last night it stood at the edge of the firelight and looked just like me. Exactly like me. I think it's almost ready. Ready for what? I wondered. I flipped to the last page with writing and found my answer, scrawled in what looked like blood. It goes to town, wears our faces, lives our lives. No one ever knows. That's when the whistling stopped. Complete, absolute silence fell over the forest. No wind, no water sounds, no night birds. Just oppressive, suffocating quiet that pressed in on me from all sides. The kind of silence that means something is listening. I didn't wait to see what. I grabbed the journal, stuffed it in my jacket, and ran. I crashed through underbrush, stumbled over fallen logs, scraped my hands raw on rough bark. My headlamp died completely, leaving me in total darkness, but I kept running.
I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. Something was being hidden from me. Not just grief, but truth. And I intended to find it, not by kicking doors down, but by doing what Kara never expected me to do, asking questions that paper couldn't ignore. It came in a cream-colored envelope. No return address. Just my name, written in Blaine's handwriting. Neat, slanted, with that little curl at the bottom of every J, like he always wrote when he was trying to be formal. Richard Madsen brought it in person. He didn't call first, just showed up on my porch with his hat in hand, and that look lawyers wear when what they're holding can't be said over the phone. He handed it to me wordlessly. I didn't ask questions. He just said he left this with me, told me to give it to you if anything ever happened. I believe he knew more than he said. Then he left. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first, lit a candle, closed the blinds, turned the porch light off. It felt like a ritual, like setting the stage for something sacred. I sat at the kitchen table where Blaine used to do his math homework. The grooves in the wood were still there from when he pressed too hard with his pencils. And then I broke the seal. Inside, one folded sheet of paper, slightly yellowed at the edges. His words, his truth. Mom, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say what I needed to when I should have. That's on me. I spent years thinking you didn't want to be around me. That maybe I disappointed you. Kara always said you had other priorities, that you were tired of mothering. I believed her. I was wrong. I know now you were trying. I just never saw it. Or maybe she made sure I didn't see it. There were voicemails she never played, emails she deleted before I could read them, birthdays you remembered that I was told you forgot. I see it now. Too late, maybe. But I see it. The day you sent me the sweater I wore in college, still folded the exact same way, you wrote a note that Kara tore up before handing me the package. I found the pieces later. I taped them together. It said, "You'll always be my boy." I keep it in my drawer. Mom, I never stopped being your son. I just thought, for a while, maybe you stopped being my mother. And that lie, it hurt. But the truth hurts more. Because now I realize I let someone else tell me how to love you, how to forget you, and how to believe you stopped caring. But I was wrong. I know that now, and I'm sorry. I love you. Your son, Blaine. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. The candle burned low. The tea turned cold. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. That sentence, "I thought you stopped being my mother," it lodged somewhere deep in my chest. Not as blame, but as an echo. Because there were moments, small ones, fleeting ones, when I questioned it too. When Kara's silence felt louder than any apology. When my own son stopped answering the phone, and I wondered if I'd been too harsh, too proud, too late. I pressed the letter to my heart and leaned forward on the table, my forehead resting against the wood, and I wept, not from anger, not even grief, but relief. Because for the first time in years, I heard my son's voice again. And it wasn't cold, it wasn't distant, it wasn't gone. I placed the letter in a frame, right next to the photo of his 8th birthday, his hair sticking up in 3 directions, frosting on his nose. And for the first time since Kara's call, I smiled. Not because everything made sense now, but because at least one thing did. He remembered. And he loved me still. She was already sitting in my kitchen when I walked in. No makeup, no rings. Her eyes red like she'd either been crying or not sleeping at all. I didn't say a word, just poured myself tea, sat down across from her, and waited. She folded and unfolded her hands 3 times before speaking. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, she said, "You think I'm a monster, don't you?" I didn't answer. She kept her eyes on the table, tracing the grain of the wood with one finger. "My mother-in-law," she began, "Blaine's father's mother, used to lock me in the pantry when I first married him. If I cooked something wrong, if I forgot to fold a towel the way she liked, she said women like me needed to be broken in." I stared at her. I was 19 and terrified. She looked up. Blaine never knew. I never told him. He was so close to her. I was afraid he'd take her side. Her voice cracked just a little. So I learned how to smile through it. I learned how to control what I could. Meals, schedules, guest lists, his inbox, his phone. She stopped, took a breath. Then one day, I realized something. That if I could control who he heard from, I could control who he believed. And there it was. Not shouted. Not confessed through sobs. Just placed gently, like a sharp knife on the table between us. "I deleted your messages," she said. "I told him you forgot his birthday, that you were busy, that you criticized him behind his back." She looked away. "Sometimes I'd cry in front of him, just to make him think you'd hurt me. He believed me, because I made sure he did." I stayed silent. She continued, "I didn't do it to be cruel. I did it because I was scared. Scared he'd stop needing me, that he'd run back to you, that I'd lose him." Her eyes welled up now. But I lost him anyway, didn't I? She laughed, bitter and small. There was a long pause, only the sound of the wind brushing against the windows. Then I said, softly but clearly, "You turned fear into a weapon." She nodded, slowly. "And I used it on the one person who only ever wanted peace." I picked up my teacup. Let the warmth settle into my hands. "I read his letter," I said. She stiffened. "I know he never stopped loving me, that he doubted me, but deep down, he remembered who I was." Kara said nothing, just crumbled, not with a scream, not with a plea. She folded in on herself, like a paper swan dipped in water. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "But sorry doesn't fix what's gone, does it?" I stood, walked to the hallway, opened the drawer and took out the framed letter, set it on the table. Kara stared at it, at his words, at what he left for me, not her. She didn't reach for it. She didn't dare. Then, just before she left, she turned to me. "Why didn't you hate me sooner?" I looked her in the eyes and said, without flinching, "Because hate gives you more of me, and you've already taken enough." She stood up to leave, but I didn't move, didn't look away, didn't let her off the hook. "Kara," I said quietly. She paused mid-step. I took a breath, tilted my head just slightly, then asked, "And you thought the best way to keep a man was to destroy his bond with his mother?" Her spine stiffened. She didn't turn around. Not yet. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "Not in the way you think." She turned then. Her eyes were glassy, wide, but I didn't flinch. I kept going. "I just need to understand," I said. "What kind of fear makes a woman believe she has to become the wall between a son and his mother, just to keep him looking her way?" Her hands trembled. "Did you think love was a prize?" I asked. "That it came with territory? That you could claim it by erasing everyone who loved him first?" She opened her mouth, closed it again. I kept my tone calm. "Even." "I watched him grow teeth," I said. "I held him when he had night terrors. I taught him to tie his shoes, to face bullies, to believe in himself when no one else did." I pointed to the photo on the mantel. "He called me Mama before he even knew the alphabet." I stepped forward once, just one step, then said softly, "You were his wife, Kara, not his jailer." She broke then. The tears came in hot, rushed waves. She tried to speak, but only choked on her own sobs. "I didn't mean to. I didn't." I held up a hand. "Don't," I said. "Don't waste breath on words that won't reach him now." She dropped to the chair, as if her legs forgot how to hold her. I sat across from her, took a long breath, then said, "There's a difference between being scared of losing someone and punishing them for having loved before you." She buried her face in her hands. I let the silence hang. Heavy. Necessary. Then, after what felt like forever, she whispered, "I just wanted to be enough for him." I looked her in the eye, and I said, not unkindly, "You could have been, but you chose to be everything else instead." We sat in silence for a long time, just two women, one grieving a son, one grieving a marriage she destroyed with her own hands. Then I stood up, walked to the cupboard, took down Blaine's old college mug, chipped on the rim, faded letters, held it for a moment, then placed it on the table between us. "I'm not here to punish you," I said. "I'm here because the only person who had no choice in all this is gone." Kara nodded. Barely. I walked her to the door, and just before she stepped out, I said, "You didn't lose him because of me. You lost him because of the space you tried to fill by erasing me. She walked away, shoulders small, shadow long against the setting sun. And me? I closed the door, clicked the lock, and turned off the porch light. For the first time in years, I felt the silence of my house as something sacred, not empty, but mine. I didn't plan to open that drawer. Not that night. I'd cleaned the study before, dusted the shelves, straightened the books Blaine left behind, wiped the framed photos from his high school years. But something felt different that evening. The air was still, almost expectant, like the room was holding its breath. My hand reached the bottom drawer of his old oak desk, the one he always kept locked, but tonight it slid open, and inside, wrapped in a faded blue scarf I hadn't seen in decades, was the tin box. It was scratched, rusted at the corners. I recognized it instantly. It was Blaine's treasure box as a child, where he used to keep marbles, trading cards, scribbled secrets written on candy wrappers. He once told me, at age 7, "Mama, when I die, bury this with me. It has my everything." I smiled through tears as I touched the lid. I opened it, and there it was, right on top, the silver bracelet. My silver bracelet, the one I gave him when he turned 9. Engraved simply, B. Halbrook, loved forever. I remember how it dangled from his small wrist, how he wore it under his shirt like armor. When he broke his arm at 12, he begged the doctor not to cut it off. I held it in my hand now, cold but familiar. A piece of time, a piece of him. Beneath it, folded carefully, was an envelope. Inside, a single key, small, bronze, with a number etched in its head, number 331, Midtown Bank, and a sticky note in his handwriting. "If anything happens to me, this is where the truth lives." I sat down, the bracelet clutched in one hand, the key in the other. And for the first time since Kara's call, I felt peace, not comfort, but clarity. He didn't forget me. He didn't abandon me. He left me a trail. That night, I brewed chamomile tea, wrapped the silver bracelet around my wrist, and stared at the key until the sun rose. The next morning, I called Mr. Atwood, my late husband's old lawyer. Trusted, quiet, brilliant. I told him about the key. He didn't ask questions, just said, "Meet me at Midtown." Noon. I walked into that bank an hour early. My hands were steady, my breath calm. But inside, I felt like a mother reaching out to hold her child's hand one last time. Vault 331 opened with a soft metallic click. Inside, a sealed envelope, a flash drive, and a small photo, me and Blaine on his graduation day, framed in cheap cardboard. On the back, written in his unmistakable hand, "I never stopped being your son." I pressed the photo to my chest, closed my eyes, and whispered, "I know, baby. I never stopped being your mother." Inside the safe was a thick envelope, sealed tightly. On the front, Blaine had written, "For Mom, if anything happens." I stared at that handwriting for a long time. It was undeniably his, slightly slanted to the right, a mix of strong and faded strokes with the same small circular dots he'd made since grade school. I opened the envelope. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with an old red ribbon. Each letter was dated, no stamps, no return address. But I was the intended reader. I knew it. The first letter was from 3 years ago, around the time I had still been trying to reach him, but never got through. "Dear Mom, I'm sorry I haven't called. I feel like something's off, but I can't quite explain it. Kara keeps telling me you don't want to see me, that you've moved on. I didn't want to believe it. But when you didn't show up for Maya's first birthday, I started to doubt. I paused. My hands trembled slightly. I never even knew about that birthday. I was never invited. I remember when I was little, you'd put my birthday cake on the windowsill so I could blow out the candles with the sun on my face. You told me never to let people forget me. And yet now, I let you disappear. The next letter came a few months later. Mom, I started seeing strange things. Messages on my phone were disappearing. Emails I sent you bounced back. Kara said you blocked me. I wanted to ask you directly, but when I did, she cried, and I was weak enough to let it go. I kept reading. Each letter was a cut into memory, into flesh. Some were only a few lines long. Others spilled across several pages. I came to your house that day, but Kara stopped me at the gate. She said you were seeing someone else now, that you didn't want drama. I left without knocking. Were you home that day? I lowered the letter. Tears blurred the ink. I remembered that day. I was home. I was baking apple pie, his favorite. I was waiting, just in case. One letter stood out. It was dated just weeks before Blaine died. Mom, I think I've been wrong. About a lot of things. The pieces are starting to fall into place. I see Kara's fear now, how she gave it power. I don't blame her anymore. But I can't let her erase you. I want to find you again. I want Maya to meet her grandmother. If you still want me, I never received that letter. But now I held it in my hands. His confession, his turning point. The final letter had no date, just 2 lines. If you're reading these, I guess I never got to say this out loud. I'm sorry, and I love you. I folded the letter gently, like I was folding a piece of his heart. Then I placed the entire bundle in my lap, holding it like I once held him. No more anger, no more blame. Just one thing. I knew my son had tried, and I forgave him, not for his sake, but for mine. I stood up, glancing around the room. On the wall was a framed photo of Blaine at 15, baggy shirt, arms raised in triumph, holding his third-place running trophy. I walked over, lifted the frame. Behind it, I found a false panel. Inside, a small memory card, wrapped in plastic, and a sticky note, "Play with Mr. Atwood." I pressed the photo against my chest, and I whispered, "I hear you, baby. I always did." It's strange what silence feels like when you know something irreversible has happened. I sat at my kitchen table, both hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of tea I had forgotten to drink. The lights were dimmed, the kind of glow that used to make Blaine feel safe. He once told me, "Mom, your kitchen light is the only one that never hurts my eyes." The letters were still on the table. The memory card Blaine left behind rested beside them like a ticking clock I didn't know how to disarm. I hadn't played it. Not yet. Part of me was afraid of hearing his voice. The other part was afraid of what I'd do after. What Kara did, what she took, can't be undone. She stole years from me. She built a wall between mother and son so high that not even grief could scale it. She buried my child without letting me touch his hand one last time. And she lied, repeatedly, skillfully. And I almost believed her silence was just sadness. Now, I had choices to make, and none of them felt clean. Mr. Atwood, my late husband's attorney, called earlier today. He reviewed the files Blaine had tucked away. The video on the card had been time-stamped a week before Blaine's passing. Blaine had been rewriting his will. He had planned to make me Maya's guardian if anything happened to him. He had told Kara. She'd panicked. The dots had finally connected. All of them. I could press charges, forgery, obstruction, emotional abuse. There was enough evidence to make her lose custody, maybe even her freedom, and still, something stopped me. I went outside and stood under the maple tree Blaine planted when he was 8. He had named it Rex, for reasons no one ever understood. The tree was crooked, leaning a little too far left, but it grew strong anyway. It reminded me of him. I looked up and whispered, "If I ruin her, do I ruin you too?" The wind didn't answer, but something shifted inside me. I thought of Maya, her small, curious eyes, the way she had hugged my leg, not knowing who I was, but somehow still clinging. What would she remember when she grew up? Her mother being taken away? Her grandmother fighting back? Or maybe, just maybe, she'd remember that there was a time when pain didn't lead to destruction, that someone chose not to scream, not to burn it all down, but to pause, to breathe, to draw a line that didn't look like war. Inside, I lit a candle and opened my journal. I wrote 2 lists. On the left, all the things Kara had done. On the right, all the things Blaine had said. The left list burned with anger. The right list made my hands shake. She was scared, Mom. She thought I'd leave her if I remembered how good you were. Don't hate her. Just don't disappear from Maya, please. I closed the journal. No one would call this justice. But maybe justice isn't always loud. Maybe sometimes it looks like choosing not to continue a cycle. Maybe it's knowing you could destroy someone and choosing not to. Not because they deserve grace, but because you deserve peace. I went back to the table. The tea was cold, but the answer wasn't. I would not erase Kara, but I would not let her erase me either. I called Mr. Atwood. I want custody rights written into Blaine's will. I want visitation, education decisions, and shared guardianship. But I don't want to go to court, not unless she forces me to. And if she refuses? I exhaled. Then she'll leave me no choice. But let her be the one who swings first. I'll be the one who stands still. That night, I finally pressed play on the memory card. Blaine's voice filled the room. It was calm, clear. "Hi, Mom. If you're hearing this, then something went wrong. But I need you to know, I was coming back. I was trying to fix things. Please don't let this break you again. I love you. Tell Maya I said that every single day." And just like that, I had my answer. I didn't need to burn bridges. I just needed to start crossing them again. A week later, Kara stood in my living room. Same house, different rules. She didn't speak at first, just stood near the doorway, fidgeting with the strap of her bag. Maya wasn't with her. Probably a precaution. I didn't blame her. I gestured toward the kitchen table. She sat across from me, stiff and silent. The last time she was here, it was to drop off a Father's Day card. Blaine forgot to sign. This time, she didn't bring anything, except the weight of what she now knew. I spoke first, calmly. "I'm not here to punish you, Kara. I'm here to be clear." Her eyes darted toward the envelope between us, thick with notarized papers and estate documents. I slid it closer to her. "I'm transferring this house into your name," I said. Her head jerked up. "What?" "You'll own it outright. No mortgage, no liens. It'll be a safe place for Maya." Confusion crossed her face, then suspicion, then something resembling shame. "Why?" she asked, nearly a whisper. I folded my hands. Because Blaine would want his daughter to have roots, and because I no longer need a home to feel like I belong. She swallowed hard. There were no thank yous, and that was fine. I wasn't looking for gratitude. I continued, my voice steady. But the rest of the estate, every account, investment, bond, has been moved into a new foundation. She froze. A fund, I said, in Blaine's name. Its mission, to support parents who've been alienated from their children. Legal aid, therapy stipends, emergency housing, anything that might help another mother or father not feel as lost as I once did. Her jaw clenched. So you're… what? Making me look like the villain publicly? I met her eyes. No, I'm not naming names. I'm naming pain and giving it purpose. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. You really think money fixes that? I leaned forward, soft but firm. Number but silence didn't fix it either, and I've done enough of that. I stood. There are only two conditions, Kara. She tensed. First, I said, Maya will know her father's truth. Not just the stories you tell her, not just the edited versions. I'll help her remember the parts of him that were kind, confused, and trying. She deserves to know the full picture. Kara nodded slowly. And second, I continued, you will not interfere with my time with her. I don't want control. I want connection. If I see manipulation, the foundation will go public, and I will go to court. That's not a threat. It's a promise wrapped in my son's memory. She didn't cry, but her shoulders slumped like someone who finally saw the boundary line drawn in concrete. I understand, she said. I believed her, not because she suddenly changed, but because I had. That night, I walked alone through the hallway Blaine used to run down in socks too big for his feet. I stopped in front of his bedroom. Inside, it was no longer a shrine. I had boxed up the photos, the toys, the tiny track medals, not to erase him, but to free myself. In their place, on the shelf above the window, sat one thing. A silver bracelet, slightly tarnished, still etched with his name in uneven letters, and beside it, a new plaque, the Blaine Hallbrook Fund for Family Truth and Healing. Every story deserves to be told. Every voice deserves to be heard. I sat on the bed, and for the first time since that phone call, the one where Kara told me he was long gone, I felt my son come home, not in a body, but in a choice, in a legacy, in a space I'd carved not from revenge, but from remembrance. The afternoon sun drifted in like it didn't know anything had changed. It fell gently across the armchair Blaine once claimed as his, worn leather, faded at the elbows, still carrying the slightest scent of his cologne if you leaned close enough. I didn't sit in it anymore. Some chairs aren't meant to be filled again. They serve better as reminders than replacements. Kara sat across from me, her hands twisted in her lap like two birds unsure whether to fly or stay still. I handed her the album. It was wrapped in the same soft paper I used when Blaine was little, the kind that crinkled like tissue and whispered when folded. She looked at it, didn't touch it at first. "What is this?" she asked. "My son," I replied, voice even. Kara hesitated, then opened it. The first photo was Blaine at 3, mud on his cheeks, holding a stick like a sword, yelling at imaginary dragons behind the shed. Next to that, him in a yellow raincoat, laughing at the storm, mouth wide open like he wanted to taste the sky. Page after page. Scraped knees, missing teeth, backpacks too big for his shoulders, arms always reaching for something just outside the frame. Kara's fingers hovered over a picture of Blaine at 7, eyes shut tight from a birthday candle wish. "His hair was so light then," she murmured. "Yes," I said, before he grew into his father's brow and my silence. She stopped turning the pages. And then, I placed one more thing beside the album, a folded note, not written by Blaine, but by me. This is the child you tried to erase, not from malice, but from fear. This was the boy who once trusted freely, until trust came with conditions. I'm not here to scold you. I'm here to show you what you tried to delete. You can't undo the past, but you can stop pretending it never existed. She didn't read it aloud, didn't need to. The tears came slowly, then all at once, and she didn't wipe them, because some grief deserves to stay on the skin a while, to sting, to remind. I leaned back and let the silence expand between us. Not heavy, not angry, just honest. She looked up, her voice cracked on the way out. I thought if he forgot, then I'd be safe. Safe from what? I didn't ask. Some answers are better left behind the tears they ride in on, but I offered one truth she hadn't expected. He didn't forget, Kara. He just learned how to pretend. Her face crumpled. I didn't know how to fix it. No one asked you to, I said gently, but you didn't have the right to destroy it either. The album sat between us, open, exposed, like a wound that had finally been allowed to breathe. Kara reached out, flipped one more page. Blaine in high school. Lanky, smiling, arm around a science fair project he built all night in this very room. I wasn't there yet, she whispered. No, I said, but you were part of what came after. And that matters, too. I stood and walked toward the kitchen, then paused. You can keep the album, I said over my shoulder, but leave the chair. She turned. That's not mine to sit in. I nodded. Number but Maya's getting taller. Someday she'll want to know what it felt like to sit where her father did, and when she does, let her. Kara lowered her head. I will. No more arguments, no forgiveness speeches, no dramatic exits, just the sound of a page turning and an empty chair, waiting for a girl to grow up and remember, not just what was lost, but what was bravely left behind. It was nearly evening when I stepped into the backyard. The sun was low, the kind of gold that wraps around you like an old warm shawl. There was a breeze, soft and slow, brushing the lavender I'd planted along the edge. I hadn't sat out there in months. Too many memories, too many echoes. But that day, the silence didn't ache. It invited. I carried a small mug of tea in one hand. In the other, a silver bracelet, the same one I'd found inside Blaine's childhood box. The clasp still worked. Barely. I sat on the wooden bench under the maple tree, the one Blaine helped me stain when he was 12, splashing more color on his shirt than the wood. The grooves were still faintly visible from where he'd carved his initials, and then tried to sand them down when he thought I was mad. I never was. I kept them there. I rolled the bracelet in my palm. I used to think healing would feel like fireworks, like rising up, like a moment where everything finally makes sense. But now, it just felt like this, quiet, rooted. A stillness that no longer needed explanation. I didn't need an apology, not anymore, not from Kara, not even from life, because something softer had taken its place. I looked out over the tomato vines and mint patches. Everything was growing again, even me. And then, without meaning to, I whispered into the golden light, Blaine, you're home now, just in a different way. A breeze lifted through the leaves, brushing my cheek like a touch I remembered, or maybe imagined. I didn't care. I smiled, not the kind you force when someone's watching, but the kind that comes when no one is. There, in that garden, I started to see things differently. The pain hadn't gone, but it had changed shape. It no longer clawed at me. It sat beside me, like an old friend who didn't speak but always showed up. I held the bracelet up against the sunlight. Let it cast a tiny circle of shadow on my wrist. That's when I saw Maya by the sliding door. She wasn't knocking, just watching, holding something behind her back. I waved her out. She came running, the kind of run kids do when they're not sure if they're welcome yet. I opened my arm. She curled into my side without a word. Her tiny fingers were warm. Her cheek leaned into my arm like it had always belonged there. She handed me a folded piece of paper, crayons, a drawing. I unfolded it. It was a simple sketch. 3 figures: a man, a woman, and a little girl. The man had messy hair and a lopsided smile. The woman wore glasses. The girl stood between them, holding both their hands. There was one word at the bottom, in big crooked letters. Again. I blinked. Did you draw this? I asked. Maya nodded. I didn't want him to be alone. I looked at her. She was so small, but some children see what adults spend lifetimes trying to ignore. I kissed her forehead. Thank you, I said, for giving him back to me, just a little. She grinned, then pointed at the woman in the drawing. That's you. Daddy said you looked like the moonlight when you smiled. I froze. Did he tell you that? I asked. She shrugged. Maybe I dreamed it. I didn't correct her. Sometimes children dream truths we forget to believe in. She ran off again, barefoot, her laughter scattering the quiet. I folded the drawing gently, placed it between my palms, held it to my heart. There were no answers, but there was a kind of peace, a knowing. The chair in the garden would stay empty, but my hands were not. My days were not. My love, it was not lost, just replanted. My name is June Halbrook. I'm 71 years old. I was once a mother. I still am, in ways that don't fit into paperwork or family trees. And now, I want to ask you something. Not as a victim, not even as someone seeking pity, but simply as a woman who has lived long enough to understand that life rarely gives us clear lines. When Kara told me Blaine had already been buried, without me, I thought the pain would drown me. But I didn't drown. I stayed quiet, and I waited. Then came the second call, the panic, the unraveling. Her voice shaking when she said, "What are you doing to my life?" I didn't answer her, because sometimes silence says more than words. But behind that silence, I had a question building. A question I still haven't fully answered. Do I forgive her? Do I forgive the woman who erased me from my son's life, who buried him without telling me, who turned my child against me out of fear, out of control, out of something that might have once been love? Can I forgive that? Should I? I've asked myself this every morning and every night. I know Blaine loved me. His letters proved that. The bracelet, the box, the drawings Maya made, they all reminded me that what I shared with my son couldn't be destroyed. Not by silence. Not even by death. But still, Kara's choices carved scars. Scars that don't fade just because time passes. So here's my question for you. If it were you, if someone had stolen your goodbye, if someone had rewritten your memories, would you forgive them? Not forget, not pretend it never happened. Just forgive. Even knowing they only came undone when the truth threatened them. Would you? I left Kara the house, not as a reward, but as a line in the sand, because I wanted her to raise Maya with shelter and safety, but I didn't leave her my silence. I left her a mirror, and every time she walks down that hallway, past the photographs, past Blaine's old guitar still hanging on the wall, she'll be reminded that love isn't control, and forgiveness isn't weakness. It's a choice, sometimes the hardest one. I didn't forgive her because she deserved it. I forgave her because I deserved peace. But still, some days, I wonder, would Blaine have wanted that, or would he have wanted me to cut all ties and walk away without looking back? I'll never know. So now, I ask you, not rhetorically, but truly, if it were you, would you forgive Kara? Would you leave her in the past, or try to reshape the future for the sake of a granddaughter who still draws families with both hands held? I want to hear from you, because stories like mine, they don't end in courtrooms or headlines. They end in hearts, in quiet living rooms, in garden benches, and sometimes in comment sections where strangers say, "I've been there too," or "I'm still trying to decide." So please, tell me, tell us. Tell the people listening quietly, feeling what they're afraid to name. Rate this story from 0 to 10. Drop your location in the comments. Let's build a global table where everyone gets a seat. And don't forget to subscribe and share this story. Someone out there may be needing it more than we think. As for me, I'll be in the garden, maybe planting more lavender, maybe just sitting, but always remembering, not the pain, but the part after, the part where I chose myself, and somehow still chose love. People expect grief to be loud. They expect it to break things, slam doors, scream into pillows, weep in public, collapse at the casket. But I've learned something different. Some grief is quiet, still. It stands beside you in the kitchen as the kettle boils and doesn't say a word. Some grief doesn't need music or mourning clothes or flowers. It just needs truth and space and time. After the letters, after the safe box, after the truth spilled in ink and silence, I didn't cry the way people expected. I didn't punch walls. I didn't scream into the night sky. I walked into Blaine's room, still untouched, still full of shadows. I opened the curtains, let the sun in. Then I sat on the edge of his bed and breathed. His smell was gone. Time and dust had claimed it. But the energy, the presence, it lingered. Like when someone leaves a room and the air still holds the shape of them. I looked around and saw things I'd missed before. Not with my eyes, but with my heart. The empty space between two books on the shelf, where he must have hidden letters, the crooked frame on the wall, his teenage baseball photo, still smiling, still proud, before the world got noisy, before love got complicated. I ran my hand along the desk, worn wood, a small dent in the corner from the time he threw a pencil sharpener at it after a bad test grade. He was 12. He cried afterward, not because of the test, but because he thought he disappointed me. He hadn't. I opened the drawer. A silver bracelet rolled out. The same one I gave him when he turned 16. It was cheap, barely held together now, but he kept it. Even after all the distance, even after Kara's silent rewrites, even after forgetting how to reach me, he still kept the bracelet. And I understood in that breathless second. He didn't forget me. He wasn't lost. He was reaching the only way he could. Through keys, through boxes, through a trail of soft, deliberate choices. My grief had been searching for loudness. But Blaine had been whispering all along, not in words, not in grand gestures, but in what he left behind. A foundation for single mothers, a donation to the community library under my maiden name, a fund for teachers in underfunded schools, the kind I once taught in. He left instructions. He left markers. He didn't forget. He remembered. Precisely. I stood up, took the bracelet, closed the drawer, and I whispered, to no one, or maybe to him, "You found your way back to me. People will ask why I didn't sue Kara, why I didn't drag her through court, why I didn't write a scathing letter to the papers, why I didn't scream. And I'll say, because Blaine already spoke. And his silence was louder than any grief I could carry. He didn't leave revenge. He left restoration. He didn't leave bitterness. He left balance. He didn't leave a mess. He left me, his mother, the tools to heal. So no, I didn't cry in front of anyone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand anything back. But when I touched that bracelet, I felt everything, and I understood what real love sounds like. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just whispers. I didn't need to cry louder, because I heard my son whisper in everything he left behind for me.